It'll just be short.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us this Tuesday afternoon. We're going to give it a couple more minutes just to allow all the attendees to file in and get ready for the webinar, but we'll be starting shortly. All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone who's joined us. Thank you for taking the time in your day, and we hope, we really think that this is a great topic as we're starting to think past the current holiday season. I know it's hard to get to think of anything but these last couple of weeks of fundraising for the end of the year, but we promise this has some great stuff to start thinking about as you enter into January 2022. As a quick brief introduction, I am Melissa. I am the Director of Marketing at Dipjar. If you're not familiar with Dipjar, we offer what I think is a very cool, fun, and easy fundraising device. This is a Dipjar. It accepts in-person credit card donations, but more than that, it makes some really fun noises. We've got a great Spark feature to allow you to create some custom campaigns with storytelling and fundraising goals to make it a really engaging experience. Of course, if you have any questions about Dipjar, you can drop them in the questions box, or you can just email us after the webinar. Two quick, things about this platform GoToWebinar, just to give you the heads up that the chat function unfortunately is not able to be used, but the way you can communicate with us is through the questions. So at any time during the webinar, if you have a question about something that AmFund is talking about, or something that you maybe think is related, you'd love for them to cover, just go ahead and drop it right in that questions, and we will get it taken care of either during the presentation, or of course we'll allow for some time after the presentation's over. So without further ado, I would like to introduce AmFund. Thank you guys so much for making this webinar possible, and we're really excited to see what you've got today.
Of course, thank you, Melissa. So I'm Callie Dunn. I'm AmFund's Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I am so honored to be joined in the studio with Monica Sakurai, and she is AmFund's Director of Marketing and our Senior Development Director.
Pleasure to be here.
So between the two of us, and we've got a great team here that's off camera that you can't see, we work tirelessly to help nonprofits raise additional unrestricted funding, and especially guiding them on their marketing efforts. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely. So I work with not only our team here on the best practices and what we're seeing trend-wise regarding the marketing of some of these events, but I also work one-on-one with the nonprofits themselves on how to guide them with their marketing plans.
So lots of blogs, lots of webinars like this we get to participate on, and really just keeping up with all of the strategies that have been ever evolving, especially throughout COVID-19 as it relates to fundraising. So today we are super excited to talk with you about the best and worst dates for special event fundraising. So we will just dive in. So to get the most out of our session, here are a few points we'd like to cover off on. And before I say that, I understand some of us are working remote, some of us are in the office, maybe the phones are ringing, kids running around, crazy animals, sometimes it happens. So don't worry, this will be recorded just like Melissa said, but we would appreciate if you do have questions throughout, feel free to pop them in that little question bar, and we'll be sure to get to them at the end of this presentation. But mainly we want to focus on what us as nonprofits have learned throughout COVID-19 as it relates to fundraising, especially, and special events, of course. We want to talk about the 2022 dates, which is why we're all gathered here today to plan our fundraising calendar. There are some unique dates for 2022 that we will unveil. And then getting into the creative uses for virtual and hybrid events in your fundraising calendar. Of course, we'll talk about a call to action and the logistics that go with any fundraising event. And finally, what are we going to reveal at the end?
The most popular date for the spring of 2022. Our calendars, I know, are filling up, and we're definitely seeing a trend for what date most nonprofits are going to be vying for in the spring.
So definitely stay tuned for that. It's a great reveal. So COVID taught us many, many, many lessons, and is still continuing to teach us each and every day. A few things that we've learned as professional fundraisers who interact with donors on all different levels is that flexibility is key.
Absolutely.
You know, we laid out our strategic plan for 2020 and then 2021, and those plans changed quite a bit.
I tell our nonprofit partners, make plans, make contingency plans, write them all in pencil, be ready to shift them, never write anything in pen. So we're going to talk a little bit about backup plans and hopefully ways to navigate the ever-changing landscape of fundraising.
So flexibility is key. Also, COVID's taught us that what's really important to consider is the comfort level of your donors, right? You have to meet people where they're at. You know, as nonprofit professionals, we do this all the time with the clients we serve, right? We cross those barriers of location and of service area. But so now we need to think about that with our donors as well. So really, you know, maybe do a survey to your past special event attendees and gauge their level of comfortability for an indoor event or an outdoor event, or would they come at all, but would they still support you and send you a check? You know, that's great as well.
Right.
So maybe do a survey, but we'll get into that. But it's really important to consider the comfortability level of your donor. And one of the most critical aspects of the most successful nonprofits throughout COVID-19 has been their reaction. So, you know, when 2020 came about and we just had mass cancellations, mass postponements of fundraising events, how do you get back on that horse, so to say? You have to act, you have to be nimble. I think that's the word we've been using.
Definitely. And those nonprofits that just came to a grinding halt, you know, they're almost a year behind. It was almost better in 2020 and 2021. Move forward with something. It may not have been perfect. It may not have quite reached your goal, but you have that much more data and just information on which to build upon going into 2022. So those nonprofits that were able to act quickly, I think, are definitely at an advantage.
And even if they didn't physically act, as in physically host their fundraising event, they communicated. They were there on social media. They let their donors and the clients that they serve know what was going on. Hey, we're here for you. Even if our offices are closed, even if our gala looks a little bit different this year and we're all outside instead of being in a ballroom, they let people know. Communication is so important, and that's why we have our marketing director here to talk all about communication. So really just keep all of that in mind as you're moving forward into 2022, and I mean, even 2023. These things are, you know, just facts that are here to stay, and we need to consider as we make our special event plans.
And I think what we've also learned is that generally speaking, nonprofits tend to be a little change averse. And I think it's unlikely, if we're given the option to change without a real driving force, we're going to do so, because we're used to having events maybe once, twice, or 3 times a year. COVID, of course, forced us all to become into a new world of change. So use that data that you've learned, learn what didn't work. That's just as valuable. So I think that that's an important thing to try out in 2022 and 2023.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you said, most nonprofits host maybe 3 events, you know, that are big special events. Our foundation partners with between 500 and 600 different events each year. So we've definitely learned the lessons and even made some mistakes along the way. And so that's why we're here to share those with you. So let's get into it. Fundraising dates to avoid.
Yes, it goes without saying. I think the first step when you're even considering putting in a date for your 2022 event, just look at the general calendar. Start with the bank holidays, start with the religious holidays, start with some major things that are going to be on every calendar once you start purchasing those for the new year.
And really, I mean, with all of the Zoom fatigue and, people working remote and then logging on after work hours, everyone's 9 to 5 has kind of shifted a little bit. So when people are able to take those vacations and to get away, they really cherish that now more than ever. They want to unplug and relax and unwind. So again, it's important to keep these dates, which are really popular vacation dates, in mind. And also, again, that survey. If you're planning a special event, survey your participants and get their feedback. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe people in your respective area do not go away President's Day weekend, but you'll never know if you don't ask.
And weather has a big part to play as well. I mean, look at the calendar, look at the months, in your areas, whether it's cold, the weather's halfway decent, that's personal to your area and to your donors. And not just some of the days, but it's also important to keep a focus for your event. Some of these days, like for instance, Mother's Day, can be incorporated as a wonderful awareness day to use as for your nonprofit, but at the same time, it may not be as effective as a fundraising event. Typically, people have Mother's Day plans, but for those that you serve, maybe it's a certain type of clientele or cause where having an awareness event around Mother's Day gives them something to do on Mother's Day and really allows that awareness for not only the public, but those that you serve as well.
Yeah, so when we are saying event dates to avoid, that is specifically for special event, fundraising events where you're going to be making those large asks. If you are a religious organization celebrating Passover or Easter that we have mentioned, that might be a perfect outreach event. So really this is as it relates to special event fundraising, which is why you'll see tax time mentioned. Oh boy, yes. Monica.
April events sometimes are a little tough. I've found, at least from the ones I've gone to, you can certainly tell, generally speaking, the ones that have gotten a good tax return and those who haven't. So when you're planning your fundraising events, keep that in mind. You may be segregating a little bit of your audience just based on what their tax returns looked at that day. So be mindful of that.
There's some psychology to that.
There is some psychology. Put yourself in their shoes. Try to think what's in it for your donors. What is going on in their lives as well? And I know that that's really difficult because as nonprofits, we're so busy. We wear so many hats between the people we serve, the causes we're supporting, but also the donors that we're trying to engage with. So try as best you can to carve out some time when you're doing a fundraising event planning session and think, if I was a donor, what would my life look like at that time and why would I come to this event?
You couldn't have said it better. So we mentioned that 2022 has some unique dates. Well, it's not a leap year. We don't get that extra day. Nope. But there are some fun dates to keep in mind, especially as you're planning your special event and theming your special event as well. So Super Bowl happens to fall February 13th this year. So I would probably not recommend a Super Bowl Sunday event if you want a captive audience. Yep. Or finish it before the game starts.
Exactly. I think actually in general, the college football season and the NFL schedules should be taken into consideration. I know you work with a lot of our nonprofit partners in Wisconsin.
Oh, absolutely.
If there's a Green Bay Packers game on that weekend, you'd better make sure that your fundraising event starts after the game.
And better hope that they win.
Yeah, exactly. So something to keep in mind. Also, Derby Day. Kentucky Derby events are numerous throughout the country, and those are fantastically themed events, and it can be a lot of fun. But there's a certain type of structure that you need to keep in mind when you're planning out your run of show for the event. I've seen events that have been tremendously successful when they make sure to get finished their fundraising efforts. So close your silent auction before they have the call to post time. Make sure that all your raffle tickets are sold before then. Maybe don't announce the raffle winners until after the results of the Kentucky Derby. But again, think like your donors. It's a betting event. If they have money in that race and their horse just won big, they might be a little bit more
generous.
A little bit more generous. And conversely, if they lost big, those wallets might slam shut. So definitely something to keep in mind. Make sure you get that fundraising done early.
Well, I know you've supported quite a few polo events as well. Isn't there like a timing to structuring like the stomping of the divots and your ask?
Exactly. There's a whole tradition to these events, much like the Kentucky Derby. So make sure you keep those in mind when you're putting your event around another event. Keep in mind what's going to be the easiest and the most fun for your patrons, but still the most effective and impactful for your fundraising.
Not only do you have a run of show for your special event, there's a run of show for the event you're theming your event around. So lots of logistics there.
Absolutely.
The Winter Olympics, which I know might seem odd that they're in July, but they're in Beijing. The Winter Olympics are July 24th to August 9th this year. So again, just keep that in mind, especially if your donor base prefers a certain sport. Don't probably schedule your fundraising event around snowboarding if you have a big snowboarding crowd, because they're all going to be glued to their TVs or their phones, and that just does not make for a successful ask. And the FIFA World Cup, where is that this year? Dubai?
I believe
Or
it's in Qatar, I think.
Yes.
I'm not a huge soccer fan myself, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know that for those who are, it is a must see, and people follow it fervently. So keep that in mind as well. But also with some of these unique dates, if you do decide that you want to structure your event around these themed events, have some fun with the sponsorship names and really get into theme. Now, keep the fundraising at the forefront. Don't get too carried away with the themes, because themes didn't necessarily mean that you raise more money. But if you do it in a creative way, it might increase your attendance. So certainly keep that in mind as you're looking at your calendar as well.
And not only the attendance, but the shareability on social media.
Absolutely.
I mean, those 6 degrees of separation we talk about all the time. If someone is the snowboarding sponsor or the figure skating sponsor, I mean, that has a nice ring to it. People ask, what's the figure skating sponsor? And then you get to elaborate about the great organization you're supporting. So there's always a strategy here with these. And Monica, while we have the calendar up, we should probably talk about days of the week.
For sure, because that doesn't matter so much the date, because we have 7 of them and they keep repeating. So we've definitely found out that some days are more effective for fundraising events than others.
Oh, absolutely. Mondays and Tuesdays typically are not the best, black tie gala nights, as most of your donor base tends to be working professionals. But there's nothing wrong with a good Thursday every now and again.
That's true. And you need to keep in mind who your donors are. It goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. Know who your audience is, know who your impactful donors are, and meet them where they're the most comfortable. So if you have a younger generation donor base, maybe some young professionals, a Thursday event is probably not out of the cards.
Right.
Just make sure to keep it very, very short and sweet, because if they have families, they need to get up early for work the next morning after putting the kids to bed. And so be mindful of what's going on in their lives as well.
And with Thursdays, having those, more urgent, more sweet and concise events, it's actually helpful to fundraising too.
It is.
Not to have it drag out forever and a live band and dancing and just piling everything on. You get there, you have the cocktails, you get to the ask, the whole point of being there to raise funds for your organization, and you send them on their way, and everyone has a great time.
Absolutely.
So that's something to keep in mind, especially if people have work the next day. But sometimes people take Fridays off, so there's a little nice flexibility there.
They do. And going back to just keeping it short and sweet, don't discount luncheons, breakfasts, events that can be done during the day, maybe on a Sunday, to incorporate that Sunday day in your calendar. They can be kept very, very short and sweet. Usually it's a 2-hour timeline.
Oh yeah.
But everything is purposeful. Everything has a reason for being there and being in your run of show.
Absolutely. And I mean, Fridays and Saturdays have typically been probably the most popular days of the week for your traditional fundraising event. So if you're going to have your normal black tie gala in a ballroom, probably sticking to a Friday or Saturday, even more so Saturday, I would say.
It's usually a 3-hour event,
right?
Usually with cocktail hour, and then of course the program and dinner, and then your ask. So.
And if people have to dress as black tie and they want to do their makeup and hair, that's how we are. They're going to need to leave work at an appropriate time. So if people get off work at 5, you probably don't want to start your event at 5:30. So there's some timing to go into that consideration as well.
Exactly. And if you want to open your general public at 6 or even 6:30, maybe even 7, don't discount the VIP pre-party as well. Chances are those are your higher level donors. They probably have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to their work schedule as well. So maybe have a pre-party or just something for your VIPs. Make it smaller, more intimate. It gives you the opportunity to network with them one-on-one and say thank you. It can go a long way, both for a networking perspective and interpersonal, but also for your fundraising with a higher ticket price.
And I mean, eventually, if you're getting a great response from that little VIP segment, that could be its own event.
Exactly.
At some point.
Exactly. You're kind of doing a test market run of that event in itself, and you'll be surprised the number of nonprofits that have taken it and maybe within a 2 or 3 year period turned that into its own event.
Oh yeah, like a preview, I think they call it sometimes.
Yes.
Well, speaking of new events, what do you know? New year, new event. Many nonprofits, especially throughout COVID, are capitalizing on the successes of virtual events. Not to say a virtual event replaces your in-person event, because let's be honest, there's nothing like good old-fashioned in-person philanthropy. That's where you're making those connections, building those relationships, dipping in your dip jar, hopefully, and really raising a great amount of funds. But with how everyone now is adapting to technology and is used to logging on for things like this and working from home sometimes, what's to say you can't add a virtual event into the mix? It's just additional funds.
Exactly. I think one of the silver linings that a lot of nonprofits that we've worked with have seen is that with the virtual event capability, not only did it give nonprofits a backup plan built into their event if they were already planning a hybrid event, because should something happen, they had everything set up with all of their fundraising opportunities ready to go online. But secondary to that was the fact that it just knocked down all locational barriers. So especially for nonprofits like schools that had big alumni networks that, let's be honest, they may not have stayed in town or in that state. They're across the country, so why not tap into that? And that's what that virtual ability gave us the opportunity to do.
And also, I don't think we've mentioned this yet, the analytics that come with a virtual event.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, the data, it's all the same. It's like tomato, depending on where you're from. But absolutely, it goes to say with the ability of technology comes the ability to track things as well. And for nonprofits, that's a godsend. The ability to build up your databases, the ability to see where your donor base is logging in, what time of day they're attending, how they're engaging with you. I mean, the list goes on for different data points. You could spend a year just digging in numbers.
Well, and it's really great too when you have those post-event board meetings or committee meetings and you have to go back and everyone's like, how did it do? Did you meet your goal? Having that data to show them is amazing. It is just calming to some, board and committee members as well, to show literally on paper the success of your work, of your nonprofit's mission, your team, what you've poured your heart and soul into. And you already have this information like that. It's right there. You don't have to go and say, oh, I didn't get the name of the guests at table 10. How are we going to connect with them? They were a sponsor. I don't know. They brought their friends. When people are logging on online, you have that instantly.
And if you think about it, the idea of a hybrid event has really been around pre-COVID in some degree. Mobile bidding has been around for probably the last 10 years or so, I'd say. And so what I think that the need to go fully virtual has shown us is that we should still keep a lot of our fundraising opportunities available to that virtual public, because they may not have been in attendance to your event because they supported your cause necessarily, but perhaps they knew someone who saw them on Facebook. It goes back to that 6 degrees of separation. So when you go back to these in-person fundraising events, consider that virtual component, not just for the mobile bidding for those who are there, but also for your fund to need, for your donate now, perhaps even for peer-to-peer, exactly. Have fun with it, do a competition. So start thinking a little bit outside the box. I don't think that a virtual event and a in-person event should be mutually exclusive by any means.
No, it's a great supplement.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes next? Let's say you've taken all of our analytics into consideration and your team has decided on a date or dates if you're going to add in a new virtual event. There's a lot more work to be done. Unfortunately, I wish it was that easy that you could just put a date on the calendar and say, all right, let's have a party. Let's have a party for a purpose. No, there are some questions you need to ask yourself. You need to ask your team. And again, if you're doing a survey, think about, being in the donor's shoes. Think about it from the donor's perspective. So what are those decisions that need to be made? Oh boy.
The format. The format certainly needs to be considered. As we were just discussing, there are some silver linings to having a hybrid event from the get-go. But with that comes a tremendous amount of legwork. You need to know the format, exactly what technology you're going to use. You need to test the technology, as we've all seen. There's a lot that goes into that decision. So the earlier you can make it and be prepared and delegate, the better.
Yes, delegate. That's a key word.
Yes, delegate to your team if you are fortunate enough to have a team.
Or even volunteers. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a one man or woman show. It definitely takes a village, as they say. So if you have someone on your board or committee who has great marketing services, tap into that. If you have someone who's great with promotional services like flyers and all the things you'll hand out at the event, take advantage of that. That's why you have a board, you have a committee, have a team to support you in this. I know COVID with working remote and everything, sometimes we can feel a little siloed and like, oh my gosh, I've just been sitting at this desk staring at this screen all day. What have I actually accomplished? But coming together, even virtually like we are now, is really, really helpful to accomplish your goals.
And I've also seen, even just on Facebook and some of the nonprofit marketing groups and support groups in general, I think because of COVID, we've all realized in the nonprofit community that we're bigger and better together. So people don't need to function in a vacuum any longer. Reach out on Facebook. If you need help with a graphic, or Canva is such a great free tool for nonprofits, ask for it, ask for the help, ask for references. I feel like people are more willing to share than they ever have before, because we're all looking to better the world in whatever cause that may be. So don't be embarrassed or feel like you need to work in a vacuum. It's not worth taking it all on yourself. We're doing enough in the nonprofit industry.
Yes. Well, we actually have a hashtag we use here. We do hashtag 501c3s unite. And so that's everything that you just said, Monica.
Exactly. We're so fortunate to be able to work with so many nonprofits across the country with so many causes that we get to hear what's working, hear what's not working, and share those great ideas. So we really are a proponent of networking and partnering with nonprofits, because I think it betters everyone as a whole.
Absolutely. So as you're thinking about, your model for your fundraising event, whether it be solely in person or hybrid or virtual, you're looking at those technologies, YouTube Live, Zoom, we're on GoToWebinar right now, making those decisions. But then you need to ask yourself, what about the giving opportunities? Because again, that's the point of fundraising. You have to ask for money, but you can do it in a fun way. So auctions are always a hit, silent or live, raffles, a donation drive, an open ask, a give from the heart. I mean, there's many different names for it, but you need to strategize that, and you need to be purposeful in those asks. Now, you don't want to throw them all together and say, well, we had 10 different ways you could support us. What do you mean you didn't know? No, that was a little bit confusing. So maybe pick, the most successful. If you have done an auction for years and it's been a hit, continue with that. Maybe if things started to shift or change, you can look at new opportunities for donors to contribute to your cause, but make it fun. There's lots of fun opportunities out there.
And some of the ways that we've seen that nonprofits have effectively used and marketed their fundraising opportunities is with the use of QR codes.
Oh, absolutely.
I've seen that around town in flyers, also just online when they're doing their promotions. QR codes, I think, they're not just for ordering things off of the menu anymore. I think that they're something that nonprofits should definitely incorporate into their events, especially when they're letting people know about the different fundraising opportunities, because the fewer barriers you can put between the donors and them dipping into their wallets and then giving you the funds, the better. And I think QR codes are a great way to do that.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's our next slide.
Oh.
So a partner that we share with Dipjar, and we're so fortunate to support this organization, is Safe Haven Family Shelter. And so we attended their event that was a hybrid event this year. Back in October, it was a dancing event. So different contestants have a peer-to-peer model and raise funds. And then at the conclusion of the fundraising, they perform these dances that they've been practicing and training for with professional ballroom dancers. So all around a fun event, not a stuffy gala in any way, shape, or form. But this was a great organization to showcase on this webinar, because not only did they have in-person giving opportunities, right? On the left, you'll see a sign that says support our mission, heads or tails. And so at this station, Dipjar was set up with different intervals. So they had a $25 interval, and then I believe they also had a $50 and $100. And so for every dip, you received like some fun swag, and then the dips were then gathered to be entered into a raffle for some of the prizes listed there. But again, as Melissa said at the beginning, it's fun because not only does it make fun noises, but it's also some donor recognition. So if the donor, let's say, arrives and everyone's in black tie, very formally dressed, and gets a funky light up necklace, then other donors are going to say, where'd you get that funky light up
starts
necklace?
the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was a fun giving opportunity. And let's be real, at the $25 level, how many people do you think said, no, I'm not going to donate? It's a no-brainer. You dip your card. Absolutely.
Yeah, it can be a lot of fun. And it's touchless.
It's so touchless. That's perfect for COVID. They don't have to sign a form. They don't have to touch an iPad and write down their credit card information. Literally, they take their wallet, they take their own credit card, dip it, and they're done. It's great. And then with the auction, when Monica was mentioning the QR code, it was so easy. Not only was there a QR code to take them to the overarching auction site that we created, so they could view all of the auction items and even make straight donations if they wanted to through that platform, but each individual trip that was on auction had a QR code in front of it. So if the donor just wanted information on the Costa Rica trip, they're like, I don't want to view the rest of the auction. This is the trip I want to buy it now. They can scan the QR code. It's so simple. And not only that, if someone wasn't at the event, let's say a man came up to the table and he's like, oh, I really need to ask my wife. Once you scan the QR code, you can text it very easily. That link is super shareable.
Right, exactly. And there are other ways to use QR codes if you're not going to go with the virtual side of things. For example, I was at an event where they utilized QR codes. They actually created a scavenger hunt at the event. They utilized the QR codes in front of several different auction items and stations for giving, like the wine pull or the raffle tickets. And you scan the QR code and a clue would pop up as to where the next clue would be. And so while they're hunting around in cocktail area in the cocktail hour for all of these different hints, there were also happened to be by the wine pull. They happened to be looking at the bid sheets for the silent auction items. So it's kind of a dual purpose fun activity. So, and I think that that's the key when it comes to fundraising events, is your donors are there for the right reasons. Their heart is in the right place. Sometimes, however, we get into that mentality of, we don't want to get some or give something for nothing. So make it engaging. It's all about the experience. And I think that 2020 and 2021 has shown us the experience is really worth, it's priceless.
And it's fun.
And it's fun, exactly.
So that was a great example of those at-event giving opportunities, which again are decisions you have to make during, the logistical planning of your fundraising event. Probably the most critically important aspect, though, when we were talking about communication and how communication is key, is marketing. And that's why we have our marketing director here.
So what we have learned going all virtual, and of course keeping it going forward into in-person events, is it's not a case of if you build it, they will come. People won't come if they don't know about your event. And oftentimes with so much going on social media now, you'll get lost in the shuffle unless you can get yourself to stand out. So learn about the platform, see which one is the best fit for your nonprofit. For example, I know I'd probably say Facebook is the most popular for nonprofits right now. LinkedIn is becoming, it's surging. It's definitely becoming more popular. Instagram has also become very popular, but Instagram is a picture sharing platform. So if you don't have something interesting to share that's visual, Instagram might not be for you, but I know a lot of the animal organizations, they just run away with Instagram accounts. And there's a great way to keep it both entertaining, because that's what social media is about, informative, but also focused on your fundraising and what people need to know. So definitely get to know your marketing platforms.
Well, and with that focus comes the call to action. So it's great to elaborate and say, hey, guess what? On October 12th, we're holding a fundraising event at the Hyatt, XYZ location. Here's a cute photo, and that's the end of the post. What's missing here? A link to register, a link to purchase tickets. You have to be prescriptive in your social media post, especially as you get closer to your event date. I think we typically say you need at least 6 weeks of heavy marketing, right?
Exactly. I would say that for sure. The more you can trickle out your marketing and kind of ramp it up as the event date gets closer, the more fun you can also have with it. I remember when we were promoting one of our auctions for the trips, we actually engaged the audience by asking them, where do they most want to go on vacation next? And granted, that particular post wasn't a fundraising post, but it gave your audience voice. It gave you information on what would do best with your audience, but it also increased the Facebook algorithm by getting that engagement component. And then as the weeks went by and the days went by closer to the event, we started having more purposeful, more pointed posts. And then that's when you start to incorporate the auction link and the know before you go information about what they need to know in order to participate. So just keep that in mind. Give yourself about 6 weeks to formulate that plan and put it into action.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because communication is a two-way street.
Exactly.
It's not just
a bulletin board.
Post.
No,
right.
It's not.
People can comment back. People can tag their friends, say, oh, Pam Smith, don't you want to go to this event with me? And then again, just like you said, the algorithm, the reach grows tremendously.
So ask questions. If you do nothing else, just ask a relatively open-ended question at the end. Get people's opinions. People love to tell their story.
Well, and all of this adds to the rule of 7. So if you've ever been in a sales or marketing position, you've probably heard that consumers have to see your brand or your association at least 7 times before they'll actually take action. And it's true. I mean, we are creatures of nature and we stick to the same thing. So why would we switch and do something different without, constantly being reminded? So the 6-week time frame leading up to your event will put you way over that rule of 7 with all of your social media posts.
With the marketing analytics, what I've noticed is that oftentimes I personally feel as if it's a lot. You're posting a lot. You feel like you're almost quote unquote bugging or nagging at your audience. But truth be told, the results speak for themselves. You'll get lower unsubscribes because rather than being inconsistent and showing them once your messaging, you're going to get them onto a bit of a viewing schedule, and that's what starts to make them lean into what your messaging is, and so they can predict, and it becomes comfortable for them to view your messaging on a regular basis.
Well, I think we have a great example here, a nonprofit partner, and this is an animal rescue, right?
It is. They're in Minneapolis. They're fantastic. Their marketing is not only, very purposeful, but it also is really entertaining. Just the way they frame their posts. Secondhand Hounds does a wonderful job of combining the purpose and the mission and the fundraising and having some fun with it. So in this instance, we actually held a virtual travel auction for them during the vacation months, July, because typically their donors are all on vacation. Oh, yeah. They're all across the country, if not the world, and they wanted a way to give them a fundraising opportunity virtually so they could still participate. So this was one of their fundraising posts that, of course, stops you in your tracks when you're going through the Facebook feed to find out why in the world that adorable dog is in a suitcase. But come to find out, essentially, they were asking their donors to please save the paws by traveling. So it was very, very successful for them. So, and you can see how much engagement it received. It had 227 likes and reactions, many comments, and quite a few shares. And it was a very successful auction at the end of the day. But definitely remember that social media, first and foremost, for your audience is meant to be entertaining. It's not a bulletin board necessarily for those who seek out your services. That there are other ways to utilize social media for that purpose, but keep them very separate. Keep your fundraising posts and your awareness posts quite separate, and they have different ways of framing them.
Absolutely, but they both have calls to action.
Absolutely.
So this one, you'll see the link at the very bottom of the post. That was your call to action. Happy bidding. Go ahead and bid on a trip. So even if you're doing an awareness event, you have a call to action. Register here to receive our services.
What do you want your donors to do next after reading your post?
Exactly. So this was the big reveal that we mentioned at the beginning. Our prediction of the most popular spring fundraising date is February 12th, 2022. And looking at our calendar, all of those dates we talked about, this is a pretty great weekend.
It is a good weekend. It's technically not Valentine's Day, but it's Valentine's Day weekend. So definitely keep that in mind. That might be a fun theme to play off of. But it for sure is it's becoming one of our most popular dates in February.
Oh yes, our calendar is filling like never before. Our board is still reviewing organizations for support. So please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to be considered for support of one of your special events, whether it be virtual, hybrid, or in person. Right. We've got a great model now with COVID and all the lessons we've learned. We're happy to partner and help. But first and foremost, don't forget to subscribe to both AmFund and Dipjar's blogs, because we will have a special follow-up blog post that will go a little bit more in depth to some of these dates and lay them out really nicely for you as a follow-up to this webinar. So if you take nothing else away, make sure to subscribe to our blogs from this webinar. And thank you again. I mean, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Melissa, for being such a great host. We love working with Dipjar. Again, like Monica said, we're so much stronger together. And so you've got, some great forces for fundraising here. So if you do have any questions or comments or want to brainstorm fundraising
I love
strategy.
brainstorming with nonprofits.
Oh,
it's one of my favorite things to do. So I'm happy to share that as well.
So we've listed our email address, our website, and our phone number. And I know Melissa said these slides will be available in post. So you'll have all of our contact information. But we really appreciate you all taking the time on a busy Tuesday to log on and just, discuss some dates with us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. I mean, I think, as we said at the beginning of this webinar, starting to think about fundraising dates in 2022 may seem like a big task as you're still looking at your fundraising for this year, but it's really important, especially as we're coming out of a world where you were relying on virtual events. Now you can get back into doing hybrid events and in-person events and really figuring out ways to make them the most successful. And part of that is picking the date, looking at a calendar and just randomly picking days. It could work, but it might not. And, what AmFund is saying is they've got some research. There are some days that might be better than others, and looking at that and taking that into account when you're planning is definitely a very good idea. So, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in that questions box right now. If you can't come up with your questions or you want to take this webinar and materials back to your teams, we will be sharing this with everyone, and we'll make sure to include all the contact information for AmFund so you can reach back out to them if you had a question about, something that they talked about. But yeah, so we'll give you another few seconds. I don't see any questions at this point. So I would just, say thank you again to everyone who attended today. We do appreciate getting to speak with you guys, and we hope that we can help make fundraising a little bit easier. I spent about 6 years in the nonprofit world fundraising, so I understand how difficult it can be sometimes. It's very rewarding, of course, but it can be tough. And so webinars like this and chatting with people from AmFund, anything we can do to help make that process easier for you, we'd love to do it.
Couldn't have said it better, Melissa.
Thank you. So everyone, we will wrap it up for the day. We'll be sharing out the recording and the slides with the contact information later this afternoon. And thank you all so much, and have a happy holiday season.
Bye. Thank you.